when historians don't have quite the information they want, they sometimes try to create it by interviewing those who were involved in the experiences that they're trying to understand. And here to help us understand oral history is Zaheer Ali, who is the oral historian at Brooklyn Historical Society. We're going to start, if you don't mind, just by talking a little bit about what's good about oral history. What does it do that otherwise doesn't get done?
Well, I think you kind of set it up, that one of the things that, of course, historians rely on to reconstruct the past are archival documents, letters, newspaper clippings, government documents, and when we look at the past, these kinds of traditional archival documents have privileged certain people. They have privileged people who have had positions of power. They've privileged people who've had access to media. They've privileged people who have had certain educational attainments so that they can write, and you know, they don't tell the full story. And so these people have tended to be men in the past. They have tended to be white in the past. They have tended to come from middle or upper classes. And so if we really want to construct the past in its fullness, we have to look elsewhere for other sources. The use of oral history kind of coincides. I mean, the first, or people consider the birth of oral history as a discipline in 1948 with a program established at Columbia University. But oral histories had been in existence long before that. This is the naming of a practice that had already been in existence, right? It becomes really popular, I think, and coincides with the rise of social history, which is a move away from what people called great man history, a move away from kind of political history or economic history, and towards what people call bottom-up history. History is told by ordinary people, a way of understanding these historic forces as they were experienced by everyday people. And oral history gives us an opportunity to access that kind of interior life that we don't see in the archives.
And why is this particularly useful for women's history?
Oral history is particularly useful for women's history I think for many reasons. One is women have tended to be one of the most marginalized or excluded or silenced groups in the traditional archives. Another reason why oral history is really useful for helping us understand women's history is the nature of oral history as a practice involves listening. And the principles of listening include being open, being solicitous, allowing the other person's voice to be heard, to have primary role in shaping the narrative. And these are the ways that, really open up spaces for the experiences of women. And I think in a way that, even oral history is a kind of shared authority between the interviewer and the narrator. So there's a cooperative spirit. And I think traditionally the kind of ways that people have thought of competing voices or dominant voices have been a disservice to including the voices of women. So, a kind of phrase that we like to use is that we're not giving voice to the voiceless, because these people have had voices. What we are is giving ears to the earless. And so really making these voices audible is the job of the oral historian.
Wonderful. So are there any disadvantages to using oral history? Are there any booby traps that we should be aware of?
Yeah, one of the challenges, of course, with oral history is you're relying on human memory, which is not perfect. And so we look at oral histories as kind of simultaneously documenting two things at once. One, an oral history is an attempt to document the past through recollection. Another, the oral history documents the contemporary moment when the recollection is taking place, right? And so you are hearing someone recalling past events, but you're hearing them recall those past events in the context of the moment that they're making that memory. And so we don't really look at it as a flaw. We actually look at it as an added bonus, that an oral history is an attempt to document two moments at once. And really it raises a flag to emphasize us as historians. We like to think as historians, when we're reconstructing the past, that we are working in a context-free space, that we're just pulling these past facts together and telling the story. But the truth of the matter is, we make decisions about what of the past to prioritize in reconstructing a narrative based on whatever our contemporary interest or motive or contextual, situation is. And so I think the oral history and the practice of oral history makes that more transparent, that I think most historians are willing to admit or to deal with.
The great historian E.H. Carr once said that depending on where the historian decides to fish in the pond, he or she will catch certain kinds of
Absolutely.
fish. So we make those decisions.
Yes.